Changing out the rear brake pads and brake discs on a Jaguar X-Type 2 litre diesel 2005 to 2009. Find some level firm ground and put the handbrake on. Chock both front wheels. Break off the rear wheel nuts. Then jack up the car, locating the jacking point, which is marked on the plastic outer sill, and put your jack on the inner sill just here. Jack up the car. Put your axle stand in on a suitable place. Remove the wheel nuts and take the wheel off. Oh, this one's stuck a bit. I'll have to get my rubber hammer. Sometimes they get stuck on the hub, so you just got to knock it loose. Often seen on alloy wheels is you get a bit of corrosion on the back of the alloy wheel mating up to the surface on the disc. Once you've got it off, it's a good idea to put it underneath the car body as well for a bit of extra security. Then you want something to lay on. I've got extended use of my Auntie Mildred's old rug again, and I forgot to wash it last time, so I'll have to make sure I do that this time, as the bedroom's a bit of a boudoir, and a bit posh at that. Here's the rear solid brake disc and caliper. Looking a bit worse for wear. It's a bit rusty because the car's been stood for a while and there's quite a furrow in the brake disc, although the wear is quite even. If we go to the rear, we can see the handbrake assembly. Important to note, you should really wear some gloves doing these brakes and wear suitable eye protection. I'm not going to bother this time because my hands are like granite, but I will wear eye protection. Here's the cable going into the lever arm with a nipple at the end, which we need to remove. There's a big spring here, and the cable sits into this bracket and it's got a little clip on which we can take out. And the bleed nipple's behind this rubber cap. Right, I'll get my plumber's pliers. Clean everything up with a wire brush and spray with a bit of penetrating fluid. So we need to pull the nipple on the cable out of this retaining clip, which is under tension from the spring. And then we can undo the guide pin bolts to take the pads out. I'll take this spring off first. I found it's easy to do this with a pair of mole grips. Gripped on the spring just below the hook, and it naturally rests on the bracket as a lever. Lift it up and off. Now we've taken away the tension, we can grip the end of the nipple on the cable tightly with the mole grips, and then get some plumber's pliers as they open quite wide. And as we pull back the lever, we can take the nipple out from underneath towards the caliper. Once it's released, we can take the little circlip off. You can do it by hands or pliers. Here it is. That just holds it onto the bracket, but it might be still tight, so you want to waggle it loose a bit if you can. So now we can take the guide pin bolt out at the top. Put an open-ended spanner on the flat part and a socket on the other and break it loose and take it out. Once that one's out, loosen off the lower guide pin bolt. Oh, my wrench is just snagging on that brake pipe there. I'll have to use a smaller wrench. Ah, that's better. Put my spanner on the flats again. You just need to loosen this one so you can pivot the caliper. Do this with a large flat-bedded screwdriver. Insert it here and pivot the caliper away from the pads, making sure the handbrake cable comes away from the bracket. Just let that hang loose for a while. Now we can take the pads out. Just knock them with a hammer for a little bit to loosen them. Right, I should be able to just pry them out now. If you're not renewing the disc, just be careful not to damage the disc when you're doing this. There's the outside pad out, which rests on the metal shims here, which we can take out next. And the inside pad. The shims just lift out like so. And importantly, remember which way they go back. You can't really get it wrong because there's a large tab which points outwards in the middle here. Now I can get some old brake fluid and clean around where the seal is on the piston. And on mine, when I pulled back the seal at the end of the piston, it was a bit corroded. So I brushed all the loose debris out as best I could and then cleaned round with a rag. Before we wind back the piston, it's important to note that there's a little raised peg on the back of the pad which lines up on the slot on the piston. So when you're winding it back fully, you've got to be aware of keeping the piston in line with this peg on the back of the pad. It's just something to bear in mind while you're doing it. Here's my little universal wind back tool. Just fit it onto the cutout and put this little plate in, tighten it up and then we should be able to wind it back nice and gently. But first we need to check the brake fluid reservoir, and as we're pushing the piston back we're likely to push fluid back up into this reservoir, so it might be a good idea to take some fluid out at this stage. And you can do that with a turkey baster like this one. Just take a bit of fluid out. It's just a question of monitoring the level as you're winding the piston back in. Importantly, the offside, driver's side, or right hand side of the vehicle, you wind it in clockwise, and on the near side, passenger side, left hand side, you wind it in anti-clockwise. Oh, my seal's looking a bit twisted. I'll just back off a minute. That seal's just nicking onto the end part of the piston, where it's okay, it's slotted back in. It's not damaged at all. Piston's now wound back and in the right position. If I was just changing out the pads, I could do so from here and then reassemble it. But I'm actually going to have a look at the guide pins now. Yeah, this bottom one feels a little bit rough, so I'll have to strip them down. So I'll take the caliper off and rest it on top of the hub. While I'm here, I'll just clean this caliper up a little bit, being extra careful not to damage the rubber seal, because if you do, it turns into a big job. In fact, I'll stick it on the suspension bit at the back here, out of the way for now. Pull the rubber bellows seal away from the caliper mount with your thumb and forefinger, and the pin will just slide out. You just gently pull the seals off. They fit into a little recess on the pin and the carrier. The top pin has got this little rubber gaiter piece on, which stops any rattling in situ. So I'll clean all those up. When I was cleaning one of the rubber bellows for the guide pins, I noticed that there's a split in this one, so I should really renew this, but I think what I'll do is I'll glue it with some super glue, making sure it's nice and clean and dry first. Here they are, all cleaned up. So I'll just put this little rubber piece back on first. I'll do that dry, so it'll stay in position. And before I put them in the carrier, I'll just clean the holes out. Do that with a rag and a drill bit. Now I can lubricate my clean guide pins. It's best to do this with some specialist guide pin grease. I'm using Permatex here. Put plenty on. Refit the gaiter. And reinsert it into the carrier. Use your forefingers to click the rubber bellows onto the carrier. Yeah, that's a lot better. Do the bottom one. They're nice and smooth now. Perfect. Right, I've just got to clean these shims up now. So I'll just spray them with some WD-40. And put them in a glass and put some vinegar in. Try that. I can't be bothered to wait for that, so I'll use some oven cleaner. What's that like? Oh, just a bit cleaner, not wonderful. Right, I'll try some caustic soda and some hot water. And agitation. Agitation, that's what you want. What do they look like? Oh, not too bad, not too bad. They seem really difficult to clean, these. If anybody knows a better method of cleaning these, leave it in the comments below. Right, I'm going to take the disc off now. The disc seems to be stuck on, so I'll just give it a belt with a hammer. Don't matter because I'm renewing it. That's loose now. As these discs don't come off without taking the carrier off, I'll have to take the carrier off first. So there's two bolts on the rear. Undo these first and it'll come off. Once the carrier's off, the disc just lifts off. Right, I'll just clean the carrier up and the surfaces where the shims go. Again, being extra careful around the rubber bellows. Right, they're nice and clean now. Get me new discs and pads. See what these are like. These are only basic pads, but they all have to meet OE standards, and I don't go racing or anything. These are the latest style from 2005 onwards, with the square tabs, rather than the earlier ones which had round tabs. They've got the little nipple on it, and what feels like a rubber backing pad. Yeah, they're quite nice, these. So look at the disc. It's always worth checking the disc with your original, see if it's the same size before you fit it. Yeah, that's fine. Just going to clean the surface of the hub flange where the wheel goes on, as it's a bit rusty here. Then I'm going to put a bit of copper grease round, so just make sure you can get the disc off next time. This is where they often get stuck on. Mine's quite tight around the centre hole. Put a bit of copper grease on the carrier where the clips go. Push the clips back in place. And then put a bit of copper grease on top of the clips. Don't overdo this. You just want enough for the brake pad to slide backwards and forwards. You just want the pads to be free running on the shims. Right, I'm going to refit the carrier now. I'd recommend using new bolts. I'm just going to use the old ones and put some Loctite on them. Align the carrier over the disc and fit one of the bolts loosely. Then the other. Tighten them up. Then torque the bolts up. Then slot the pads in. By pushing the pads in at an angle at the base of the clip, and then forward towards the disc, aligning the little tagged ears to slot in the loop recesses, making sure not to touch the surface of the pads, of course. And then you need to slip on the caliper, making sure you align the piston recess with the tag on the back of the pad and fit the handbrake cable through the bracket. Once the caliper's in place, you can refit the guide pin bolts. Again, fit new bolts here. And torque them up to the correct torque, which on these is 30 Newton meters. Clean off any grease spots with a rag or some emery paper. Then grip the handbrake cable nipple with your mole grips. Use your plumber's pliers to bend back the lever and slot the cable into place. Grip your spring in this position and hook on the bottom clip. Rest your grips on the lever and lift up onto the bracket. Then refit the clip. It just pushes and clips into place. And that's about it. And don't forget to check the brake fluid level in the brake fluid reservoir. Depress the brake pedal and pump it a few times to build up some pressure. Make sure it's okay. And then bleed the brakes if required. Recheck the level in the brake fluid reservoir and top up if you need to do. Put the cap back on and clean up any excess brake fluid and the job's done. I hope this helped you out, guys. And although I haven't done it here, it's a good idea to put some copperies on the stud face, especially around the centre where the wheel fits on. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, it really helps out with the channel. Feel free to share the video, and if you've got any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Have a look at the description for some useful links, and if you haven't already subscribed, consider subscribing. So that's about it. I'm off in, it's started to rain, and my Auntie Gertrude wants a tea, so I'll bid you farewell, and hopefully see you on another video. And as always, thank you for watching.